Jim Joyce, and it's the
There we
real
are.
Jim Joyce. I know AI is taking it over, but there's
Yep.
nobody that can replace Jim Joyce, the real Jim Joyce. I tried to no avail.
Thank God. Thank God.
No,
Thank God.
exactly. But I know our schedules finally aligned, so which is
Yep.
great. So great to have you back. Let's hope we can get some more consistency in it. But I also
Yeah.
realize it's a crazy world out there, and we got to do what we got to do. So to all
Yeah.
of our millions of listeners and viewers, apologies, but we're here whenever we can.
We're back at it. What episode are we now?
That's a good question. We're in like season 14 now. So we skipped 13, by the way. Like, I don't know, just
I think we both needed a little luck, right? We need to kind of
yeah,
move it.
exactly. But as I let John in, so
Yep.
I'm super excited to have John join us here.
Awesome.
So John Whyte, John and I were stalking each other on social media for a while, um, and then we finally met in San Antonio. Welcome to the Shot of Digital Health Therapy, John Whyte.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me.
Pleasure, pleasure.
Great
It's
to meet you,
been
John.
Nice meeting
I'm
you.
trying to I'm trying to remember. I think it was LinkedIn or something we exchanged to have you on. Just things
Probably.
didn't transpire until meeting in 3D. That's when the connection, the click happens, right? And so thanks to Mond Johnson and the ATA for
Yes.
bringing us together.
Yeah. And LinkedIn. Still around. I heard it's like 20 years now or something. So
I
it has
I
survived.
I don't even know what's the newest thing, Blue Sky or something that's replacing Twitter. I can't even keep track of it anymore. But anyway,
Yeah.
welcome to the shot,
Welcome.
John. As
Thank you.
usual, for the millions of listeners and viewers that we have, take us through your life journey, and then
Sure.
We'll interrupt.
we'll rudely interrupt as
Yeah.
usual.
So well, thank you for having me. It was great to connect. That's the beauty still of in real life type of
Yep.
connections. Virtual is not the only way to connect nowadays. But I'm a physician by training, and I still see patients 1 day a week. So I've always seen patients throughout my professional career in every job that I've had. I've always talked about it beforehand. And my journey is I'm kind of the classic doctor at that time that, you grew up wanting to be a doctor, you studied chemistry or biology. I studied chemistry, you went to medical school. I did all of that in the Philadelphia area where I'm from. But, in college, I decided I wanted to learn more about economics. I want to learn more
Hmm.
about the health system, which is kind of unusual, but I went to the University of Pennsylvania. They had a Leonard Davis Institute that dealt with health economics and really got interested in that. Um, Thought I'd be a surgeon, not a surgeon. I'm an internist. Uh,
I was
but
gonna ask. So
I
internist.
did ask a lot of people for advice and said, like, well, what do you think? I want to be involved in health policy. Even at a young age, I want to be involved in these issues. And everyone said to me, become a good doctor, learn how to be a doctor, focus on that right now. And it's funny, that's the advice that I give to a lot of students that call me because I
Yeah.
feel like it's impacted every part of my professional career, even now. As you may know, I was at FDA and I remember talking about e-prescribing and, I still saw patients. So I'd have to say to like the commissioner, the center director, okay, let me tell you how e-prescribing works. Let me tell you
Right.
how alerts
The
work at the
geek in the room.
PDMP.
The
The
geek in
PDMP.
the
If I have
room.
to minimize something on a screen and open up a new one, it's just not going to happen. It may seem simple, but
Right.
it's not. Um, so, I came to Washington from fellowship at Stanford because that's where a lot of health policy is done. So I've been in
Mhm.
California and then came to Washington, worked at Medicare, really enjoyed the government, but I'm one of those persons that have felt you go in and out of government, you don't stay there forever. Because you can bring a lot of skills,
Yep.
both ways. So I was at Medicare, really working on coverage issues, detoured into the communication world, the media world, ended up at Discovery Channel for 10 years.
Oh my gosh.
They had approached me to run this health medical programming, and I was kind of snooty, like, why would I do that? Like TV.
Right.
I'm a
I
doctor.
I thought you were an advisor to like the House show or something. One of those
Yeah, yeah,
doctor
that was pretty
shows,
good.
you
They did
know.
well. House did well. But I thought Discovery Health and Discovery Channel, we had a lot of health shows back in 2005 through 13, and really focused not on the being on TV. So even though I was on shows sometimes, there were two doctors ahead of me. They didn't last because they put themselves on shows. So they each lasted less than a year. And the job was to run a business, was
Okay.
to run health programming, a special category on the weekends
Okay.
that was in daytime. And they didn't quite get that. Whereas I quickly learned you need to manage a P&L, you need to
Yep.
manage a team, and doctors aren't always good at that. And I always look at that's been a great skill that I've learned at Discovery Channel. I stayed there almost 10 years. It was a great opportunity. But
Wow.
then it goes back to
What
the
would we
point
play
where,
on a Saturday? What would be a typical show? Like, so on
yeah, a lot of
Saturday.
my shows are more on this health and medical programming that was like the global epidemic of diabetes,
Okay.
or the changing face of cancer treatment. So very focused, not
Yep.
they
Right.
weren't the biggest shows
Right.
that would rate. And then when we were at
And
Discovery Health Channel, go ahead.
no, I was
Was
gonna say, it's like as you were saying, like on Saturday afternoons, I'm like, what? Like I'm trying to remember when you had to be
Yeah.
there in front of the TV on a
It was
particular
Saturday
time
morning. It
or
was
morning.
Saturday
Oh,
Sorry.
morning. So the
Oh,
reason why
yeah.
I say that is it
right.
turns out 8, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., those were the heat slots on weekends because then people get out and about. So
Yeah.
Right.
shows like at 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. actually do very well for a weekend.
Hmm.
But then I'd be involved in shows that called like a half-ton woman, 200-pound tumor. And we struggled with this. Advertisers really didn't want to be involved with these
Yeah.
anomaly programs, right?
Okay.
But they would get big ratings in
Right.
terms of Born Without a Face. I still remember some of these ones.
There's a
Mystery
lot of that.
Diagnosis.
There's a lot of that on Snapchat, actually. You can like
Is
subscribe
there
Yeah,
to a lot of these. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Like I
health
love the one
anomalies?
now. It's on TLC, which is a Discovery owned network. Pimple Popper, and I thought, oh, that would be like back then, where you just see this stuff coming out. But it was a struggle at times where you have this anomaly programming, and then a global epidemic diabetes show isn't going to rate as well just because it's not as glitzy. But I'll tell you though, some of those shows like 200-pound tumor, that was after we did a show 150-pound tumor, and they saw it on TV, and then they to the
Wow.
doctor. It's always like neurofibromatosis, these very large tumors
Right.
on your back. So it is I still remember that now 10, 15 years later. So it clearly was a good show.
And then
Um,
On Monday, you would see patients. You would walk in and see patients after seeing,
yeah,
like,
it's
yeah.
usually back then it was usually a Friday because
Okay.
it's
Okay.
had to be easier.
Right.
And most,
Right.
patients don't usually even now know my day job. Very few of them do. I don't really talk about it. And it's great. Being in DC, still in the DC area. You can meet with members of the administration or the Congress or go to the White House for a meeting.
Right.
And it's great because on Friday, which is when I see patients, nobody cares. They
Yeah.
want to
Well,
know like what's their test results, what's happening with their diabetes. It's very grounding.
well,
And
we need you on Friday because the other doctors are golfing on Friday. Is that the usual?
it's Friday is when everyone decides they need to get in before the weekend,
100%.
right? So it is a very
Yeah.
busy day. Well, and Mondays are very busy because everyone has called on Sunday that they've delayed. That I wish there were golf days. I've never had a
Right.
part of that. It is very busy
Right.
for clinics nowadays for everyone.
That's awesome. And but when you see these patients, have you been seeing the same patients? Like, like if I was seeing you would have 10 years or 20,
I
that
don't
kind of
have
thing?
my own
Okay.
panel per
Okay.
se. I do mine at a Kaiser Permanente, so they're not all over the
Ah,
country. So I'll help other doctors manage their patient loads, right? Because
got it.
it's
So you'll get
very
a
busy right
flow.
now. So you might not be able to see your doctor today for somewhat of a semi-urgent problem, so you'll see me instead. and then
Right.
I'll work to manage your care until you can get back in.
Keeps the
What
muscles going, keeps
That's right.
all that medical,
That's
what's
right.
happening, what's
Yes.
yeah. I'm fascinated by that. Like that's a
what's
long time to maintain it.
what's the new name? KP and Geisinger?
Oh,
Geisinger?
yeah. What is that called? It's something like resilient. It's not
Yeah,
resilient. Something like rising or something. But
something with an
remember,
R, health.
that's going to
Yeah,
be managed as like a separate company, I think.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And Geisinger still, at least currently, is going to function as it does, and KP will continue to function as it does, which really is kind of a unique system,
Right.
but functions very well.
But let's
Uh,
get back to you. So, doctor practicing,
Discovery
Discovery
Channel.
Channel, you discovered your inner media personality, even though, you
Well,
learned the
I
business
learned a lot
side.
of,
Yeah.
skills managing, but then I decided I wanted to go back into government. It was the setting of the ACA. I wanted to be involved in health policy. So I went to FDA.
Okay.
Now I will tell you, at first, everyone looked at me and wanted me to run like a PR group or the Office of Communications. I was like, I'm a doctor. Like, I want to be involved in policy, but they looked at being at Discovery Channel meant you were involved in media. But instead, I ended up working at FDA. Many of you know Janet Woodcock, who's terrific, who wanted to create this Office of Engagement and Professional Affairs. And how do you work with advocacy groups? How do you address clinical trial diversity? And was there for about 5 years. Terrific opportunity there at the Center for Drugs at FDA. And then decided, I wanted to reach consumers again. And the government is not the best in communicating information on health. So WebMD had approached me, and I've now been at WebMD, which also owns Medscape, for about 5 years. I usually
Okay.
stay places like 7 years on average.
7 year,
It's
like
the
a 7 year,
it's the 7 year
seventh
itch,
inning.
No
right?
longer. Yeah.
The seventh
Yeah.
inning stretch. Got
Yeah,
it.
that's about the average that I stay. Discovery was
John,
a little longer because I thought it was
you're like
7, but it was like, no.
you're like signaling. Yeah, 4.5 years. I usually do 7. A
Yeah.
little
I think
Yeah,
a
signal
yeah.
little
out
longer.
there.
Yeah.
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 So WebMD, probably one of the first, people kind of associate WebMD
Yeah.
with the look at that, yeah, with the let's call scientifically backed, vetted
Yeah.
information, right? In
Right.
the age, you could
Mhm.
argue, I don't know how you define digital health, but maybe just wanted to actually hear your thoughts on coming into WebMD. I
Yeah.
mean, really a search slash. I know there's a lot more to it.
Mhm.
But your view, what's happening in the digital health space, the
Yeah.
promise of it,
Mhm.
and how it fits into the larger
Sure.
health ecosystem.
And WebMD is now about 26 years old. So it has
Wow.
survived for a long time where others have come and gone. And I was talking to one of the early folks involved with it, and they talk about how, 25, 26 years ago, they couldn't raise money at the very beginning because
Right.
it was this idea, no one's going to go to the internet to get health information. And I still remember as a clinician when patients would print everything up and then hand it to you, and then you would take it and then just do what you want. Now they tell me what they think they have. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not. Someone told me they thought they had costochondritis the other day. They actually said that word. And I was like, good differential, but that's not you today. But I was glad you looked up. And, I think this is the concept that search has changed. And in the past, you would print that all up. And now you engage in discussion. But even more so, I would argue, and this is how we're iterating at WebMD, you want to search content, but then we need to connect that to care because your expectations have changed, especially over the past 3 years. So if you see a suspicious mole in your arm, you don't want to wait 4 months, which you have to at some places to go see the dermatologist, or you have
Right.
joint pain. You don't want to wait around. So what we can do is connect you to a telehealth visit. We can connect you to an app that might be able to look at, moles on your skin. And that's where I think digital health has really changed and is changing how we think about delivering care. Everyone has a smartwatch on, or what I'm calling smart jewelry, smart ring. There's a smart necklace coming out. How do we use this information? Because what I'm really excited about is this concept of that health happens outside the doctor's office.
Yep.
And we
Sure.
haven't really embraced it. And I know you guys feel the same way, that here we have all this great data that I can collect at home in terms of your biometrics, in terms of, there's a device called Lumen. You can breathe into it. And I'll tell you whether you're burning carbs or fats. I tried a continuous glucose monitor for several months, and I don't have diabetes, but I wanted that personalized data. And then
Yep.
how are we utilizing that? Do I really care what your blood pressure is in the doctor's office, or do I care what it is every day? And I can do that. You know, lab tests that you can do at the home rather than you have to go to the doctor's office, get an order, maybe be able to get it at your doctor's office, and then go somewhere else. So if you search STDs, STIs at WebMD, we can send you a link depending upon where you live, because medicine is
Yep.
regulated, as you know, by states. And we can send you a way to get an STD test. And at first I thought, oh, this was before the pandemic. I thought, oh, is that a good thing that we should be doing? Because how are we going to talk
Right.
about safe sex practices? How are we going to talk about all these other things? How am I going to feel for inguinal nodes? Doctors don't even always do that. But I thought,
Right.
no, this is a way that we're going to try to reduce disease burden. This is how we're going to reduce stigma. So that's what I'm really excited about, this finally personalization of data.
Mm.
And that's where I think we're not utilizing it efficiently. We haven't even touched, we haven't even scraped the surface of what we can be doing.
Mm. And I'm actually curious because, I mean, obviously Jim and I also been and big believers in self-care and, leveraging the data. The counter argument by many physicians is still, patients walk in, they self-diagnose, they give me that, maybe not a piece of paper anymore. It's annoyance. They worry, they text me because of XYZ, and that self-diagnoses and being in your own head and, Dr. Google or WebMD, but, backing it up. So your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Doctors are cynical about everything, and they're not early adopters. And there's still this category of these patricians that I'm the doctor, I know best, I went to school, stay in your lane, right? So object to everything. And I'm hearing that now with ChatGPT, where I know we'll talk about it. Everyone wants to say, oh, it makes mistakes, it has biases. And I wrote this post on LinkedIn that's very popular. I said, let's acknowledge doctors make mistakes. Doctors make mistakes often at times.
Yeah.
Doctors have biases that are implicit and that aren't always explicit. So let's be realistic. And, at WebMD, our philosophy is, and this has been mine really from my professional career, knowledge is power, right? And it's not just information, it's knowledge. So the more knowledge that I can give you about your disease, about your condition, about signs and symptoms, that's going to make you healthier. That's going to make you don't have to be a better patient. I really don't like that term. It's really an empowered patient. And I was talking to folks the other day, I really want to move to this concept of patient-driven care instead of patient-centered care. That was the buzzword for the last couple of years. Everyone's patient-centered. It means something different to everyone. You talk to a couple of patients and now you think you're patient-centered. It has to be patient-driven, that the patient should be driving how we deliver care. And we're not there. And doctors aren't always the best conversers. And somebody I know you're both interested in, someone came up to me, can't make this up the other day, and a patient said to me, what do you think of Graham? And I was like, why do you want the test? What are you thinking about?
Yeah.
And he had tried to Google, but it was a great opportunity because I could say, look, 23andMe is looking for something different. They're not the same. That's looking for inherited mutations. Grail is looking for these cancer fragments, these other signs of cancer at this point in time, right? It's not talking to you about your risk. It's talking about this point in time. And, there are challenges with both of these tests, but what I'm excited by, they're iterative. They're going to get better. ChatGPT is going to get better. And we have to figure out a way to work with developers, to work with innovators. Patients have to do that too, to help drive it. And physicians and other healthcare practitioners, we can't always be like, oh, this is bad for patients. It's not. It's going to empower them. How do we make sure they get good information?
The biggest thing when I think about this, oh, sorry, Eugene, is this this act of confidentiality. Like I find that, when we all think about, we're kind of moving this phase now where we feel like everything's being tracked, right? Like everything's being tracked. And even as I, get a little older,
Yeah.
And now I'm all of a sudden concerned, say I Google a condition or something. I'm like, oh, what if I can't get insured? Or what if what if I go in a record? Or what if it's this? And so you're going into, or think of these great companies like there's an Irish company called Let's Get Checked.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know them. Sure.
Yeah, and well now they're kind of probably more US centric now, but
Yeah.
they began their journey in giving people confidential access to testing
Mhm.
for STDs,
Yeah.
largely, and then expanded into a broader spectrum of health. But actually, people have the same feeling if you're checking for a cardiovascular condition. You might have the same impression of like,
Yeah.
geez, I don't want everyone to know. Do I want to go to the doctor and
Yeah.
and have a record now? And then it feels that's going on. So this kind of dichotomy that now I'm going to go into Chat GPT. What happens to all that data? Like, do people trust it?
Right.
Do you feel like
No,
when
I've
they
heard
walk in, they
that. Yeah.
trust?
It's
Go ahead.
sometimes I find it's generational, and I don't know if that's stereotyping, but someone the other day said to me that they didn't want to get this test that I thought they needed to have done because they were concerned that it would impact their life insurance
Right.
policy, right? So they're thinking of the concern about privacy and tracking. But I find in a lot of younger patients, they're like, text me it.
Right.
And they'll say things like, "Oh, I was glad I got
Right.
this. Like that was a good prompt,
Right.
for me to think." Like they're like,
That,
"Sure, bring it on. Like I'll learn
On
more
TikTok.
from this." I do
I
think we
I think
definitely
there's
have
going
to
to be
address
a
privacy, but yeah.
sorry. I hate to,
Sorry, Eugene, go ahead.
no, there's like delays. Apologies on my end here. Like I'm behind you guys a little bit. I was saying I agree with you that there's a generational piece, and if you think about that openness, everybody public on Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
watching my younger kids, right? And they're actually now almost in reverse. Their profiles are private on Instagram, et
Right.
cetera. So it's actually, I think we're sort of skipping some of the
That's
generations. It was
interesting.
closed,
Yeah.
open, and then the reverse again. And I'm not
You think,
saying everybody's unique
right.
and different, right? And they have their
But
If
own
you're right.
stance. But
We have to have a way to address it. I will tell you, when
yeah,
I was using a CGM, I posted some of them on Twitter, and it was like crowdsourcing. Like it was great.
Right.
I felt like a lot of people were giving me comments about, my blood sugar level and how I could address it. So, but I did that, right? And
yeah,
I
it's
made
your
that
choice.
conscious decision to do
Right.
that. And that's what I think we have to address: the privacy issues, the life insurance, the health insurance, the other aspects, job issues. People do have implicit biases about discrimination against, people with disability and
Right.
other aspects. So it's something that we have to address, but it's also about how do we, as I said, empower people with much more information. I would argue in some ways we don't need more data. We need to better utilize the data that we have, and how do we incorporate it more. We still have issues of interoperability. How are we getting your health data into the health
Right.
record that I can use? And someone was talking to me about, oh, they could send these labs as a PDF. I'm like, that does not help me. Like you
Right.
cannot search the health record as a PDF. And as a
Right.
physician, when I'm looking at things for other patients, I'm not clicking the PDFs.
Right.
And
Right.
that's
I
an
mean,
issue. And you think it's 2023. How are we doing that? How do people still use fax machines? That's what I don't know. I think the
that's
doctor's
mind
offices are the
blowing, right?
only ones.
On one
It
aspect,
is.
there's Chat GPT that's doing, differential diagnosis of a patient record. On the other side, there's still facts, right?
I
Right.
know.
It's absolutely insane. And I think what you said earlier, John, right? Like, the technology, things will iterate and get better. And same thing, maybe Chat GPT, it will evolve. There will be other, HIPAA compliant and SOC 2 compliant and high trust
Mhm.
Right.
compliant learning models and GPT models. So it will evolve over time. I do think that people will want that to be proprietary, especially in the private market, right? Just because this is data that does become valuable to augment your own staff, right, with your
Mhm.
own unique processes and workflows. So
Right.
lots to be discovered. But I don't know, my quick little use case, and this is, I'm still doing the tweeting, but now I'm asking Chat GPT to take my longer post and give me the
Yeah.
threads, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it converts
Are you
into
doing
a
that?
thread. it's
Yeah.
still my content. It's just helping me do the threading, right? Like,
Is it better? Is it better written? That's not even stated. Well, better written. It's, I should ask
probably. I mean, my
Yeah.
Marina always jokes around that I don't know any language perfectly. So
That I was at a medical conference over the weekend, and one of the biologics coordinators was responsible for fighting claims that were rejected. And the fellow was hysterical. He's from Mississippi, and he would go into ChatGPT and write what he wanted to say, and then they would write the defense for to fight the claim, a rejected claim. And he's like, look at that, man. He's like, that wasn't written by a guy from Mississippi. First of all the commas are in the right places.
Yeah.
And he wrote this beautiful, referencing clinical studies and doing all this stuff. It's almost like I don't know anyone that could write such a beautiful, succinct article in whatever.
And
10
sometimes you do
seconds.
need to check the facts, because someone was going to introduce me, and they're like, "Oh, I had ChatGPT look at your bio," and they sent it to me, and it said I was an assistant professor at George Washington University School of Medicine, which would be nice, but it's not true. And
Right.
even some other things that I've looked at times, it's been a little inaccurate, but those are going to get better, and that's why we have to embrace them and work with folks on it, and really think about, again, this patient-driven care and how we're going to improve the care of patients. Because I think the pandemic has changed everyone's expectations. No
Right.
one would think about doing a lab at home or a test at home.
Right.
And now you're quite comfortable, to these other tests, Everlywell, Let's Get Checked, and others that can make it more convenient for you. I mean, my issue with that is you own the data, which I agree with, but how does that data get into the medical record? Because I can't go by attestation of patients.
Right.
They say, "Oh, I checked it and it was fine," and then I don't have time during a 15-minute visit to input labs.
So how long? What's your prediction? When will ChatGPT, or the clinical version of ChatGPT, be able to prescribe medications?
I think prescribing is a totally separate issue, because remember, that's managed by boards of medicine and boards of pharmacy. So they'll probably take action to
liability is the challenge
now
here.
in terms of diagnosis, but a doctor is still going to have to sign that. A licensed prescriber is going to have to sign a prescription. But even then, I don't see that changing in the short term. The government doesn't move quickly. Whether it can help with diagnosis, I think that's a real opportunity in terms of inputting symptoms, looking at data. I think it can be very relevant for tumor boards, where you want to think about how cancer care should be managed, and that can be very hard in community centers. I think certainly we see AI helping in immense in radiology, because you're looking for patterns. I think prescriptions are different, because at the end of the day,
I'm challenging you. So 20 years, 30 years. And so,
that's a long time. That's a long time.
Yeah,
but
my point is, I think that'll be, there's no way, it's like it's like the classic self-driving car. There's no way that if I could go on, put in all my symptomology and my records and there, and they could tell me, within a reasonable rate, why would you, within a reasonable, whatever risk window, why would you put a expensive person on the end of it? I mean, it would just say, it just strikes me as but it
is your health. It is your health. So you have to think about it that way. And it's funny you meant the self-driving car. So I usually show these two slides at presentations. One is the Google self-driving car, and I say, how many people would get in it, right? And usually maybe only about 10% of people raise their hand, but there are a few people that raise their hand. I do not raise my hand. I have young children. I'm not going to get a self-driving car at this point. And then I show this headline that says the Defense Department has these AI tools that can trigger strikes. And I say, how many people think that's a good idea, that AI can weaponize systems and launch attacks? And they're all like, no, that's too dangerous. And then I say, but why, when it's your own health on things, you just take anyone's advice on the web or a blog, or you'll just try something? So I
Yeah,
think it's also measured.
I was trying to be a little more provocative to think
Yeah.
about the future when that risk is managed. You know, like it's the idea,
Well,
like
that's what it is. It's
if you
about
were
the
in the room
management
and
of risk.
if you were in the room, whatever, 100 years ago, and you said, "See this metal tube, you know, I
Yeah.
want to stick you all in it and send
Yeah.
you off to Europe."
Yeah.
How many people want to go
Hey,
into it?
Yeah. But we use
hey,
tools
Jim, we're
now in
here.
pharmacy to look at,
Drug
you
drug
know, drug
interactions.
interactions,
Yeah.
allergies. Like, I think it could be
Yeah,
very helpful in terms of ID, infectious disease issues to help. Sometimes so we don't have to call the ID specialist and get a hold of them.
right.
But at the end of the day, the physician will be the prescriber. So we'll see. But we've been talking about robotic surgery for a long time. That's been more than 20 years, and we don't have,
That
robots operating autonomously.
right.
So we'll
Look,
see.
I
It's
think
wild.
with every single technology, there's a hype and a scare, right? And then people realize, like a stupid thing, you missed it, John, but I recreated Jim Joyce on using this thing Mid-Journey and tried to like put his voice to it and all of this. In doing this, which I only spent about an hour, I realized there's now competition for what's called prompts, right? Chat GPT prompts, Mid-Journey prompts, who can
Oh,
write the best prompts? So all of a sudden, these creatives are now not necessarily creating the graphics, but they're creating prompts. It's a job shift, right? But
yeah.
still using that creativity and their talent to
Yeah.
describe the best possible picture. So
Right.
we're seeing this
Yeah.
crazy cycle now, but I think
Yeah.
it'll settle. It'll be augmentive. It'll help. I do want to go back to human beings. Just one quick question before we sort of dive to Jim's famous last question. You mentioned a couple of things. One, patient-driven care. I love that. And then, how do you look at it with shared decision making? I actually had a
Mhm.
whole discussion with,
Yeah.
a physician. Shared decision making, and I think you may or may not know, but Maria and I, we run a tech-enabled coaching company, health coaching
Mhm.
company, and many physicians still trying to understand what's really the role of a
Yeah.
coach, right? And the way we look at it is you can do the shared decision making in the office, but adhering to that decision, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
to your earlier discussion of, most of health happens
Mhm.
outside of it. So I'm curious how you look shared decision making, role of, health coaching
Mhm.
triangulated with patient driven care, which ultimately a
Right.
coach's job is patient or
Yeah.
consumer driven discussions, right? But
I think shared decision making is a skill set that I wish more doctors learned and practiced. And sometimes it is back to this patrician attitude. I'm in charge. I know best. Why would I ask you your opinion? I will tell you what to do, and you can decide
yeah,
whether or not to do it. And then I get mad when you don't take your high blood pressure medicines and do other things. But what I think part of the struggle is it's a compressed visit nowadays. People are coming in with higher acuity. There's a lot of things I have to do. There's a lot of measures that I'm going to be judged against in terms of, is everyone with diabetes on a statin? What's people's A1Cs? Where are we on screening? And shared decision making takes time, especially when you're first learning it. But that's where I think Eugenia goes to. We have to empower people with
yeah,
knowledge and good information. And let's be honest, most people go to Google. There's data that shows 90% of people go to Google before they go to their doctor's office. So they're already searching. I always ask patients, I don't say I'm at WebMD, I say, what are you concerned about? What did you search? What did you think it is? And
Right.
it is about 9 times out of 10, they'll tell me that this is what I found. And I think it's also, I see a lot of patients that are newly diagnosed diabetes. I don't put everyone on metformin right away. I do have that shared decision making. Here are the risks: high blood pressure, here high blood sugar. This is what you think you can do, and we agree on a specific time frame: 3 months, 6 months. They're going to come back.
yeah,
Usually 3 months. Now I will tell you, sometimes they don't come back. I've seen this over the years. They don't want to address it. And a patient said to me just last week. He said, "You're not like other doctors." And I said, "Sure." I was going to be like, he says, "Other doctors are always pushing the medications." And he
Okay.
says, "You're not." I said, "Well, what I'm saying is we're talking about what a plan is together."
yeah,
And I said, "You might need to be on medication." I said, "Honestly, I think you will likely need to be on medication just because you haven't made any changes.
Yeah.
He didn't go get his labs. He did it on purpose.
Right.
But we had a plan, and we've had a plan for the last 6 months. Now, on the other side, I've had a patient that has done extremely well with this, and he eventually had to go on medicine, but not as much as he thought he would be. He's being managed with a single agent, and the same thing, he appreciated that. But it takes a lot of time, and it puts me behind in my visit.
Yeah.
But that is the style that I think we need to train more physicians in. But then a big thing that I focus on WebMD is how do I empower patients to ask questions and ask the right questions? Sometimes
Yep.
patients are intimidated in terms of what to ask, or they want to please the doctor. And I really focus on, what are the right questions you should ask? How do I know if I should be on this medication? How do I know when my symptoms should go away? When should I expect that to go away? How do I know if I'm doing better on this high blood pressure medication? But that takes a lot of time to go over it with them. And I'm not always sure the doctor is the best person for everything. Like diabetes educators are very good, lifestyle coaches are very good, but then we all have to talk together. And that's this whole concept of health happens outside the doctor's office, right? So how am I empowering you to have those discussions with me when you come back in?
Yep.
Awesome.
So Jim, let's go to your last question, and then we'll let John go.
Right. So you take a moment from your busy days. Put yourself back in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
You just came from was it Buster's, or you came from
Like
you're walking down
Binders, that's a really old restaurant there. Yeah.
you're going out of Binder. So you're coming out of this restaurant.
Wawa started.
Wawa,
Right.
that's right.
And you're coming out of the restaurant, and you see there's a young, it looks like a very intelligent, kind of person that probably spent time in media. And you look at him, and he walks up to me, he says, John, John, I've been following you, John. I've been following your career. I just came out of a tour of duty in the FDA. I came out of a tour of duty in Medicare. And now I've come up with this phenomenal piece of technology that's going to leverage all of the patient's data and all of their experience in order to inform them before they walk into a doctor's office. And I've got this idea, and I'm bringing it to market. What's the one piece of advice that you would give that younger version of yourself?
Wow. I think part of it is you have to be open to change and be open to ideas. And the reason why I say that, and I think I've done that, but a lot of people don't, is like you think you're on a certain path and you know how that's supposed to go. Go to medical school, you go to residency, you do a fellowship if you go to a big program, and then you practice for a few years. It doesn't have to be like that. And even when you're starting with a new technology, that's the beauty of it. It's new. It doesn't have to follow the same path as everything else. And it's hard sometimes to think outside the box, especially when you might not have role models to say this is how I'm going to be. But my approach has been, and I would say to this younger version of myself, be open to change, network with like-minded people that are going to encourage you to be bold, to do different things. So that's probably what I would say. That was a tall order to offer.
Love it.
Beautiful. Love it. Be open to
John,
change.
thank you so much for making the time in your busy schedule.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure to reconnect again, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
That'd
Great
be
to meet you,
terrific.
John.
Great seeing you both. Thanks.
Thanks.